revelation. I took a journey spiritually. My eyes beheld a vision shone clearly in front of me. Well, in the vision I saw an old man slowly beating a drum, humming a melody that was strange to me. Then he called me and said, Sandra, come. He arose and he showed me a country, beautiful everywhere, a land of endless bounty and the riches beyond compare. There was enough for everybody, for all their material needs. But alas, when the old man showed me, my people, they were all overpowered with greed. And the old man beat his drum. The old man beat his drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them of the wrath to come and if you hear him, bye-bye. Revelation time. This is revelation. This is revelation. I want them of the wrath. You're gonna get want them of the wrath to come. Leaders were fighting each other. They were tearing the people apart. Friends who used to live happy together, now hatred filling their hearts. Neighbors were cursing neighbors, whole villages in mayhem. I heard they were listening deceitful leaders who were preaching for doctrine to them. Look, compassion went out of the window. Deviousness reigned instead. Morality was low, 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 but the people were spiritually dead. But the old man beat his drum. The old man beat his drum. Enough for everybody, for all their material needs. But alas, when the old man showed me, my people, they were all overpowered with greed. And the old man beat his drum. The old man beat his drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them of the wrath to come and if you hear him, bye-bye. Revelation time. This is revelation. This is revelation. I want them of the wrath. You're gonna get want them of the wrath to come. Leaders were fighting each other. They were tearing the people apart. Friends who used to live happy together, now hatred filling their hearts. Neighbors were cursing neighbors, whole villages in mayhem. I heard they were listening deceitful leaders who were preaching for doctrine to them. Look, compassion went out of the window. Deviousness reigned instead. Morality was low, 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 but the people were spiritually dead. But the old man beat his drum. The old man beat his drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them of the wrath. And if you hear, warn them of the wrath. You're gonna get revelation. Revelation. You know what he tell me? He said, go tell it on the mountain, over the hills, and everywhere. Oh, tell it on the mountain. The old man beat his drum. The youths were all in a quandary, no sense of direction. They lost all hope cause they just can't cope. They're ready yet, but they're gone. They have no respect for their elders, no respect for themselves also. Their spirits were all in tatters and reading an all-time low. Then I hear them cussing the system, they're cussing the leaders too. But they were raping, stealing, shooting and looting, but they all had nothing else to do. The old man beat the drum, the old man beat the drum. He said, take this melody, girl, what do your country want over the road to come on and say, want them on the road to come. Want them on the road to come. Leaders were fighting each other, they were tearing the people apart. Friends who used to live happy together, now hatred filling their hearts. Neighbors were cursing neighbors, whole villages in mayhem. I heard they were listening deceitful leaders who were preaching for doctrine to them. Look, compassion went out of the window, deviousness reigned instead. Morality was low, 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 cause the people were spiritually dead. But the old man beat it drum, the old man beat it drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, want them on the run. And if you hear, want them on the run, run again. Revelation, want them on the run. You know what he tell me? He said, go tell it on the mountain, over the hills, and everywhere. Oh, tell it on the mountain. The old man beat his drum. The youths were all in a quandary, no sense of direction. They lost all hope cause they just can't cope. They're ready yet, but they're gone. They have no respect for their elders, no respect for themselves also. Their spirits were all in tatters and reading an all-time low. Then I hear them cussing the system, they're cussing the leaders too. But they were raping, stealing, shooting and looting, but they all had nothing else to do. The old man beat the drum, the old man beat the drum. He said, take this melody, girl, what do your country want over the road to come on and say, want them on the road to come. We're gonna get revelation time. This is revelation. This is revelation. Want them on the road to come. He said, talk to your spiritual leaders. Tell them get on their knees and pray to get rid of all these karmas that driving good spirits away. Then he tell me, talk to your fellow Calypsonians. Tell them stop the shame and disgrace. Encouraging people to get on bad, jump up and up the place. But behold, I saw the sunrise coming over the mountain range. The old man said, that is a symbol of hope if your people get serious and change. But the old man beat the drum. The old man beat the drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them of the road.
I know you guys feel.
Oh yes, I feel in the spirit tonight. I feel in the spirit tonight. The old man beat the drum. Go tell your people turn from their wicked ways. We on a mission. We on a mission. We on a mission. We starting with my people first. Black people, that's your music. That's your song. That's your gift to humanity. Spiritualism. We doing nothing without the spirit. We are starting first with black people because you all are in trouble. And when we're in trouble, we got to listen to the old man. Mr. Operator, I don't want any comments tonight to be displayed. Please, I said it already. I want no comments to be displayed. Good evening and welcome to Politics 101 tonight. I'm feeling the spirit. I'm feeling the spirit tonight. So that our people can listen to the old man. The old man beat the drum. He said, go tell it on the mountains. Go tell it on the mountains. Good evening to all of you and welcome. We have a big show tonight. Double header. Aubrey Norton is here. He's ready to go. And later on tonight, Nigel Hughes is going to be here. This week has been quite a week. We started on Monday with Sherrod Duncan and his team. We had our brother Roysdale Ford there on Tuesday. Last night we had Amanza Walton Desir. And tonight, Aubrey Norton, the incumbent leader of the PNC, leader of the opposition, leader of the APNU, chairman of the APNU, and Nigel Hughes, who is vying for the top spot in the Alliance for Change. As I said, we are setting an example. We are setting an example. A comrade called me this morning early, and he said he looked at the interview last night and the interview the night before, and he wants to ask me why I'm promoting people and not promoting myself. And I said to the comrade what I said here. People got to promote me. People got to promote me. I don't promote myself. What I do is that I open up my platform to all comrades. The only party I not open up this platform to is the PPP. I open this platform to all comrades, PNC, AFC, and of course my own party, the WPA. This is a zone of unity. I want to set an example. I want to set an example to our comrades, to our people, and to our country that we can unite. We can disagree. Last night at the end of the program, I complimented Amanza on her answer to one of the questions I asked, the question about balancing defense of your people, defense of your race, and your national duty to the country. How do you balance the two? And I complimented on her answer. And some of you asked, Dr. Hines, is that an endorsement? And I said, I'm not endorsing nobody. Aubrey Norton is my friend, going back 40 years when we were both little boy at UG together. And despite our sharp political differences between our parties, over the years we have maintained a friendly relationship. And so it must be. I've gotten to know Amanza, and she's a person that I like very much. I can call her my friend. Roysdale, I got to know later over the last 2 years or so, and we have developed a cordial relationship. They're all my friends. They're all my comrades. We are in this together. We are in this together. I have political differences or differences of political opinion with each of those candidates. I've known Nigel Hughes. He has represented me, represented my comrades, not asking for a cent. Not asking for a cent. I've gotten to know Sherrod, and I think he's one of the great communicators of our time, And so therefore, the point is, whoever wins the leadership of the PNC, whether it's Amanza, well, I understand Amanza now was dropped out of the race, whether it's Roysdale, Aubrey, I got to work with whoever is the leader because I believe in, first of all, opposition unity and then national unity. I got to work with whoever win. Whether Nigel or Sherrod win on the other side, I got to work with them. I got to work with them. Whoever win. So it's not about endorsement, but I'm one of those persons, whether we are friends or not friends, if you do what is right, I say what you're doing is right. And if you do what is wrong, respectfully, from my side, I will say what is wrong. Good evening. You all share the link, share the live, because it is a big show tonight. And you all know, on the show, if the wicket and the conditions are right, I'm swinging the ball both ways. And I got a sharp bouncer like Andy Roberts. One fast and one slow. And if the wicket taking spin are coming from the back of the hand and are coming orthodox, because this is a zone of seriousness. I'm not playing. I say I start with you all black people. I start with you all black people. We got to get back our spiritualism. We got to get back our mojo. We got to get back what God sent us here for as he walked us out of that plantation. He didn't walk us out for stupidness. And some black people dep on stupidness. And part of my story is to get black people off of stupidness. Off of stupidness. Off of stupidness. That's my mission. If they call me racist, then that's their business. Burnham wants the back to back, belly to belly. I don't give a damn. I done dead already. Good evening to all of you. Good evening to you all Bostonians, and see you all out in your numbers tonight. Good evening to my wonderful people, West Babis. People down the river, up the river, Ithaca, down Dagarat, down people. I met the Barakaro people last week. How about the people on the quarantine? Those on the west side, Essequibo, in the hinterland. We are all in this together. And the lovely people, the resourceful people, the people who I consider to be the face of Guyana, because they bring the East Coast, the West Babis, quarantine, all together, Tambo Linden. And to you in the diaspora, without you all, we can't do this. We are all in this together. So we're ready to go tonight. We start with Aubrey, and then when we finish, we will go to Nigel. Again, I said, Mr. Operator, I don't want any comments on the screen tonight. The only thing on the screen tonight is me and the guest. I want to say a special shout out to people I met today. I was at the conference of the Guyana Historical Society. Sister Hazel Wolford puts on that conference every year, and it was nice to be there. I presented a paper on independent labor action, but I also heard some wonderful presentations today. One young lady presented on the village movement, another lecturer presented on slavery and its impact on African people, and I told them I'm going to use them. It was nice to sit next to Dr. Janice Imhoff, someone who I've known all of my adult life, but we have never really met. and we met today, and she said something that in me is. She was talking about language. As I was leaving, she said, David, don't go, wait. And I didn't know what she wanted. She wanted to talk about language, and she quoted me as saying on this program, if you name any socio-political issue, cultural issue, and I find a calypso for you. And she was talking about language and this Creolese language that we have. And she said something that struck me, and I kept muttering it as I was driving to come to this program. She said, our children have difficulty with English language. Have we asked why? And our language? We say, well, you know, the education system, but the teacher did not teach properly and so on and things, and that's why we children having difficulty with the English language. And she said, part of the problem is we got our own language, which is Creolese, the our language. And that language came out of our experience. And that thing, you know it, but when somebody with wisdom say to you, oh, Jesus Christ, oh, I could have never said it like that body said. Big shout out to Dr. Imhoff and Hazel Wolford for that conference. It continues tomorrow. In case those of you in Georgetown, it's at the Crystal Labor College. It's a conference of historians who present papers on various issues. All right, I think we are ready to roll. Let's bring Mr. Norton in. Yes. Aubrey, good night.
Good evening.
Your song is not coming through.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, I'm hearing you now.
I was saying good evening to you and your viewing and listening audience.
Thank you very much for coming on tonight, because I know tomorrow is the big day and Congress begins tomorrow. Let me start here, Aubrey. My countryman called me about 2 days ago. He is a former minister under Burnham's government, Minister of Education. He worked at Congress Place. I'm talking about my countryman, Malcolm Paris. Malcolm is my neighbor. I born and grew just 2 or 3 houses from where Malcolm born and grew. And he called me, and he said, Master, them old time banner, they got that term. He said, Master, when I used to work at Congress Place and Congress coming up, it was an exciting time. People coming in, bringing resolutions, this, that, all kind of position paper. The Congress was something that you look forward to. I said, yes, Malcolm, although I was in the PNC, I could have feel it from the outside. He said, but today, the Congress has been reduced to election for leader. And again, it struck me, Aubrey, because I was looking for an answer to what is unfolding before me in 2024. And Malcolm provided me with that answer. And so, therefore, I use that as my premise to ask you this question. What is the PNC hoping to achieve from this Congress?
Okay. Now, the Congress is a multifaceted thing. First of all, you'll have people coming from all 10 regions. And one of the things you hope to achieve is to deliver a message to all the persons coming to the Congress and to the wider society. The first objective. The second thing, one uses it to mobilize and energize your base. And I believe in some regard that is done, even though sometimes there is the over-exuberance with election. And then there are questions and motions. A lot of discussion, party groups are asked to pose questions. In fact, I received my list of questions and motions this evening. I haven't been able to look at it, But we hope that we will answer those questions, either adopt or amend or reject the motions. And we hope as well that by the time the Congress is through, we would have given clear political direction to the party and to the nation as a whole. Those are some of the things we set out to achieve. Of course, the assumption that is made is that people are around long enough and know the culture and history of the party. Some people are new, and so that might miss them. But generally, there are a lot of people in the party who know what happens over the years, and there's the excitement. A lot of our delegates, especially from the hinterland, are already here. Some from the United States and Canada have arrived. And so it also provides the opportunity for us to come together and really experience the camaraderie that is characteristic of a political party. And all political parties have certain levels of camaraderie, though there are times when there are factions that emerge that one has to deal with.
Aubrey Norton, they're explaining the wider importance of Congress. Of course, everyone has been talking about the race for the leader of the party. And as I said, my countryman Malcolm, Elder Malcolm, Brother Malcolm, reminded me that Congress is more than running for election. And I just wanted to put that out there. Aubrey, you have been in the PNC since 1972. You're talking about 50 plus 2 years. So in a sense, you've grown up with this party. When the party was formed in 1957, it was formed as a party to usher in independence, to nation build, and all the issues and perspectives that came with that. And 30 years later, as we came to the end of the Cold War and the introduction in our countries here in the Caribbean of structural adjustment with the IMF and the World Bank, and they're coming into being of a kind of individualism, which was a departure from the ethos of independence. Because independence, we welcome independence to Guyana. And it was about together we build. We became a cooperative republic. It was about the collective, everything. But by the time we get to the end of the 1980s and move into the 90s, we saw a movement away from that cooperativeness, a movement away from that fidelity to the nation, and how it was faced with the challenge of that time. And in a sense, he repackaged the PNC to meet that time. And you yourself participated in the turbulent politics of that transition in the 1990s. And I think 30 years later, here we are, where our Guyana is undergoing realignment again, the coming of oil, petro-state, the return of the colonials in the form of investment, Guyana in the middle of geopolitics, a government in place that is not shy of beating up on people who didn't vote for them, is not shy of humiliating one of the major races in Guyana, a government that is aligning the state with criminality, a government that has lost all morality, that even the United States has to say to them, you all involve in transnational crime, not just individuals, but the state. With all of that happening, Aubrey, I am submitting that your generation, you and the others who are vying for leaders, you all have the responsibility of reshaping and repackaging the party to meet the needs of this time. What, in your estimation, what kind of PNC would you like to see to meet the needs and the challenges of this time?
Now, let me correct something you said. I think some people in the PNC encouraged it when you said that the party started in 1957. In my speech tomorrow, which I've already prepared, I will make it very clear.
Not right, 1957, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The PNC emerged really in 1955 after the split in the people.
Oh, after the split. Okay, all right.
So one sees the inception of the PNC in 1955, and then the change in name in 1957. So one can talk about the origin of the PNC being 55, but the change in name and use of the name PNC is 57. I wanted to clarify that. One has to understand that societies evolve. When I joined politics at the time, the focus was on socialist values, living together, working together, self-help, all of those. Let us not forget that after the Russian Revolution of 1917, and more so after the 1940 World War II, 1945, where the world became divided into East and West, and that the capitalist system was challenging the socialist system, and it became known as the Cold War. The conflicts from that era, produce some things that we have to pay attention to. One, it was like a battle between collectivism and individualism. The second thing we should note that information technology was playing its role. At one point, it virtually transformed the world with the coming of the internet. And so through what a particular writer calls soft power, the media, etc., they were used to create perceptions. And we saw a clash between these two cultures. And what in essence happened by the fall of the Berlin Wall was that liberal capitalism emerged the stronger of the two. And so what happened is that individualism became predominant. In fact, years ago, if you had a shirt you got from overseas or so, and it couldn't fit you, you give it to your brother, now they sell it, which gives us clear indication of the change in the value system. What we have was a shift towards individualism and this thing that all that matters is money. In fact, there's now a common saying in Guyana, money got to make. Now, where do we stand on this? I don't want to get too deep into my presentation, but in my presentation tomorrow, I will do the repackaging you were talking about. We have to be cognizant that there is a role for the individual, but that at the same time, we have to develop the moral fabric of the society. We have to put certain principles, etc., in place so that we develop a balance between the pursuance of individualism while at the same time maintaining certain amount of collective responsibility that allows for patriotism, that allows for focus on the family, that allows for focus on the community. Because you see, if everything comes down to the individual, we will run into problems. And so I think that we are at the point where we have to merge elements of the collective with the individual to ensure we utilize the resources in the society to develop the individual, the village, and the entire Guyanese society. And I don't want to go too far in my presentation, but essentially I will repackage the PNC as this political force that would have made changes. I believe that the core values are still maintained. In the post-colonial era when we emerge, our task is to get rid of injustice in the society. That continues to be the same, even though the strategies might change. The second task that has always been set is to build a strong economy. That has to continue, but we have to now not just get a strong economy, but an economy that is ensuring justice is done and not all the resources go to one set of people. And the third thing in the economy, in the values we have always pursued, is to ensure we give Guyanese a high quality of life. And I believe those three core principles that we stood for over the years allow us to understand the extant political economy and to bring a vision for a new society inclusive of changing elements of the extant economy. That is how I see it.
Aubrey Norton, incumbent leader of the PNC, leader of the opposition here tonight. Later on tonight, we're going to have Nigel Hughes on this program, and we're going to be talking to him about his leadership bid in the AFC. I want to say good evening to Christopher Westmus. I started my day attending the homegoing service, the funeral of his brother, Gary, who was laid to rest today. The Westmus family, of course, is a well-known family. His brother, Nigel Westmus, Dr. Nigel Westmus, is my grow match in the WPA. We came up together as teenagers. And so I've known the family, I've known Gary, and he was laid to rest this morning. So I started my day. My condolences to the Westmus family on the loss of their brother, their son, their cousin, and to say that keep on keeping on. Death is not the end of the work that we have to do. Mr. Operator, I noticed that you have blocked Albert Morgan. Please reinstate him. Please reinstate Albert Morgan. I don't know what he did to make you block him, but please reinstate him. Aubrey, you are running for office again. The last time you ran 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, you won by what we call a landslide. You served 2.5 years, and you're running again. Why are you running again? Why? You are 2.5 years. Are you running to continue what you started? Are you running because you're not satisfied with what you did in the first 2 years, or are you running because you like power? Talk to us.
I am running. Yes. First, to understand why I'm running, you have to understand why I started the journey.
Great.
In the PNC, I've always been very supportive of every leader. And I was very happy to do the work on the ground. When the last Congress was coming, I felt that at the time Mr. Harmon had said he was not running, Mr. Granger wasn't running. And I thought at the time, one of the few persons that existed that understood the political culture of the party and the country happened to be me. And I thought that the party needed to return to its grassroots base, engage people, and to ensure we build back the party. And so when I became a leader, my main focus was to do a number of things. One, to engage the international community to create an environment in which the PNCR and the coalition are accepted and seen as a political force with a clear vision. The second thing I want to say here is that at the time, our supporters felt abandoned because you would recall we were out as a result of election and there wasn't much political action. So I ran, I became leader with the sole focus of rebuilding the party and preparing it for government. I can say to you that we went out into the communities, we engaged people. Many of them told us off. Some of them were telling us we did nothing, and we had to show them what we did as a government, and we did more than the PPP with our resources. I think some of them have come around to accept that. And so the critical task is to rebuild the party. We did a lot of work on the East Bank, the quarantine, and in the hinterland. And our work in the hinterland has shown, because a lot of the recent village elections, either people who we support or people who are not PPP became head of their communities, and I think that augurs well for change. Now, we are at the point where we are also building a core of young people, the likes of Vince Roy Jordan, the likes of Ganesh Mai Paul, the likes of Riaz Rup Narain, the likes of Vince Roy Jordan. I can continue to name them. We have assembled a core of young people, and one of the tasks I am undertaking is to bring them close and to guide them and share with them my political experience as we develop them, and to prepare the party for general and regional elections. I see us as being people who have to give hope to our people. We have to take this party to the next elections, but we have to do it with a vision. We have to do it with an improved organization. And for all of those reasons, I continue to be and will vie for the leader of the party, because I do believe, barring Vincent Alexander, I am one of the few persons in this party who not only understand politics, understand the culture, but have been around enough to understand the machinations of the PPP and counter them. Of course, the sole objective is to get government. And I'm saying to you, I'm here to nurture these young people who want to be nurtured. There are some who just believe they should fly to the top of the tree without understanding the tree. But those who want to learn and be nurtured, I have no problem working with them, and I have been doing that. And so our aim is to get political power and to serve the people of Guyana. I do not see political power as an end in itself. Political power is a means towards an end. And that is to be able to serve your people, to be able to develop programs, policies, etc., that will transform the lives of the people of Guyana. And it is for those reasons I am vying for the leader of the party, and I'm prepared to work with other groups in the society to build a broad coalition and move us to victory and ensure we can deliver to the people of Guyana while helping to change some of the things that the PPP did that are not conducive to what we want to do. For instance, the PPP has created a situation where they just want to create people who are dependent on the state. And they do handouts. Now, we will do, for the want of a better word, handouts, but it will be structured in a way to take people out of dependency and make them self-sustaining individuals. Those are some of the reasons I am here. And I want to say this, all the people I talk with, all the persons, young persons around me, I say to them, if you want to become a multimillionaire, don't come to politics, or else you will be corrupt. If you come to serve the people, then come. And you stand a better chance of delivering to your people without developing a kleptocratic society like the PPP has developed, where each and everyone feels that they have to rob the treasury. That we have to change.
Aubrey Norton here tonight, speaking it as he sees it. Aubrey, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I was wrong, and you were wrong. In fact, you were close to the action when, upon Burnham's death, a few years after Hamilton Green attempted to challenge Desmond Hoyt for leadership. And there was some bloodletting during that period. Hammy left, formed his own party, came back, but it was brutal. But in my estimation, in all of the vying for leadership in the PNC, I've never seen a campaign that is as dirty as this one. And you can correct me. I have never seen a campaign that is as dirty as this campaign. And I am not one of those persons who blaming anybody. What I have seen is the emergence, or well, not the emergence, but an emerging culture that is about contestation without manners. And I gave the example last night that when I was growing up, me auntie and them neighbor used to cuss Matty out and all kind of thing. And she and Miss Uriel, they would cuss out. And when I passed in, me and my sister and my brother, we got to tell Miss Uriel morning, we got to say hello, because if we don't, and Miss Uriel allowed, we get licks when we go. I'm saying, in our culture, there was contestation with manners, contestation with consideration for the humanity of the other person. I have to say that I think this campaign has crossed the line when it comes to dirty campaigning. Question: do you agree with me? And if you agree with me, what do you think are the origins of it? And secondly, as the ultimate leader of the party, do you take some responsibility for it?
Let me say this. These things don't emerge as an event. They emerge as a process. In the first place, you had a core of people that control the party. That core of people lost the 2021 party elections to me. In previous elections, when people lost, the tendency is for them to work together. From the time I won, a group emerged contesting everything that I did, for whatever reason. I would say I contributed to it in this sense. A lot of times when these challenges come, they come from a class of people who believe that ordinary people like Aubrey Norton shouldn't lead. And so there is a kind of automatic contestation almost immediately. I don't like the commenting on other politics, but I also think Sherrod Duncan is facing the same thing. In some regard, here is an ordinary man. He's been working in the party, he's been doing the things, but for some, this ordinary man should not be there. It should be the old elite aristocratic group that is in control. And so that contributed. Then you had a situation where a lot of persons ended up in leadership position in the party, not by coming in the party and struggling and understanding the party, but many of them arrived there even before they joined the party. And so they themselves are not steeped in the party culture. Now remember that a lot of them that are emerging weren't steeped in the values that you and I know coming up in politics. They're coming in an era of transactionalism. This thing is a transaction. And so they come to be involved in a transaction. And I think that also would have contributed. But I want to say this to you. I agree with you that this is one of the worst in terms of the bitterness, etc. But I do not think that that is the party. The base of this party is very respectful. They do things in a mannerly way. And one of the reasons I was kind of reassured of victory is because the base believes that I've done a good job. I have been in the party all the time, and in some regard, people are being disrespectful in their approach. And so there are a number of variables that would have contributed to where we are at this stage. And I think one of the most dangerous things a political party could do is to have people who are not part of a political culture, who don't understand, they have never made the sacrifices for a political party, and then to them, they stand the chance of taking over the political party and doing whatever they want. And I believe those variables have commixed to produce the kind of dirty campaign. I wish you would observe that when I campaigned in 2021, I avoided personal attacks. And in this campaign, I have avoided personal attacks. What do? I think post-Congress, we have to ensure that there is party discipline, not meaning that people shouldn't be able to talk, etc. But people should be able to express their views, disagree, and then work together. And I want to give you one of the classic examples I had that seems to elude this new generation of politicians, for the want of a better word. In the 1979 YSM Congress, Vincent Alexander ran against Lex Stanley. It was a campaign that was highly contested. At the end of that campaign, all of us went together and spoke. And one of the things that is absent from the new political culture, in my opinion, is that it brings a malice into the party and a bias and a factionalism that is dangerous. We have to deal with that. So I think those are the kind of variables that would have contributed. If you're in a party over a period, you tend to know the actors, you tend to know how to engage them. If you are not, you tend to come believing that you have all the skills in the world. And one of the things I must tell you about grassroots politicians, one of the worst things for the grassroots is if they believe you're contemptuous of them.
Yeah. Aubrey, and I'm making a distinction here between blame and responsibility. As the leader of the party, do you take some responsibility for what has transpired?
For the viciousness, no. For the fact that some people can believe that they could just do as they like I could tell you, I can say this because it's a fact. Very regular throughout this term, I have been calling some MPs to say, we have no problem you having a view and a statement, but you should pass it through the leadership of the party so that it is consistent with party policies. And a lot of the new, who I call social media politicians, don't believe in that. They believe in getting it out first, regardless of what damage will be done. I would say in some regard, very early, I should have put my foot down on what was happening, and that I should have recognized that it wasn't the kind of party we used to have in which people understood politics, understood political culture, and would have sought to be on one page rather than creating their own pages.
Aubrey, let me ask you a question that I've asked.
There is one other thing.
I thought you were finished.
One other thing I should add. The fact that this term started with the opposition leader different to the party leader in the sense of Harmonist Party as opposition leader, David Granger as party leader. What in essence happened, it allowed a runaway political parliamentary group, which unfortunately generated some difficulties.
Aubrey, you mentioned about the broad coalition, in your opening statement. And I asked this question of the other two contenders, and I'm asking it of you again, because you and I have talked about this publicly on this show. We have talked about it privately. Let's be frank. the APNU really was a coming together of the WPA and the PNC. And then there were individuals and some, small groups. The WPA left the APNU after the 2020 election. The AFC had joined the APNU after saying that they would not side with any of the two big parties. But the difference was they were coming into a coalition and not the PNC, not to side in with the PNC. And so the coming together of the WP and the PNC really broke the ice and opened up possibilities for coalition politics. The WPA is gone. The AFC is there as part of the parliamentary group. They have to, because that's how they fought the election. But in effect, they have left the coalition outside of parliament. And so therefore, as one speaks about putting together a broad opposition front, you and any leader of the PNC, you have the challenge of rebuilding that coalition. How do you intend to go about doing so if you're re-elected?
Well, I've started to engage the WPA. You're part of that process, because I do believe that critical to the APNU is the WP. I think the other significant actor, or relatively significant actor, is GAP, Ghana Action Party, which has an indigenous base. But when I speak at coalition, I don't speak only of the political party coalition. I'm engaging the churches. And I've been visiting the churches, working with them. I have been engaging the Rastafarian community. So my concept of a coalition is much wider than what we have. However, when it comes to the political party running, that will be a coalition of political parties. But the success of that coalition is dependent on you building a youth coalition, coalition with the religious groups in the world, in the country, with specific special groups. That is the kind of coalition I think that is needed. And we will continue to work on such a coalition. I said before, we are engaging the WP. I will engage GAP. And as chairman of the APNU, I will work with those bodies to build the APNU and to engage other groups so that we can widen. But one of the problems, I think, of the last partnership, and it is still a problem, we don't get a chance to meet regularly so that we are on one page in terms of our political platform. And one of the ways I intend to build it is by building this political platform. We have in the PNCR talking about a people-centered development strategy. We will engage other elements in the coalition to bring to bear their views on it. I had sent, I think, a document to Dr. Clive Thomas, and I had indicated that we can engage the WPA, engage other groups, so that we get more information and have a more united platform that we move forward on. The second thing that needs to be done is, as we move forward, we actually work on a modus vivendi, a mechanism for us to engage and live and work together. Very regularly, it is loose. You will know as a political scientist that one of the most difficult things to manage is a coalition. And what happens in some regard is one group ends up dominating and you don't have a genuine coalition. But then another problem in coalition, there are some people who really don't have representation, but they believe they have rights, the equivalent of the bigger groups in it. That also is a problem. And then you have to know what a particular coalition, a party group or political group brings to the coalition. For instance, I say to people, one of the fundamental reasons why the WPA must be in a coalition is that it has always had intellectual capacity that can be useful. That is one. The second reason, whether we like it or not, if you're going to beat the PPP, you need the WPA, because when the WPA was on its own, it always got 1 or 2 seats. That suggests it has a base. And so we have got to work on that, and we have got to work together to create the kind of understanding that is propitiously disposed to the functioning of a coalition body.
Just as a follow-up, one of the criticisms of those who held that meeting and voted you out as chairman of the APNU is that there's not been regular meetings of the APNU over the last 2.5 years of your tenure. You know, it's something that I feel passionate about, and you and I have talked about this privately whenever we had a chance of catching up on what's happening. We had 2 meetings, I think 2 years ago, one at Burnham Court, one at Golden Grove, and then recently there was one at Linden, which was there was some miscommunication. But do you accept the fact that you could have done some more work on that front? And do you commit yourself to increasing the emphasis on that kind of broad coalition work if you win the next term?
I prefer when I win, but let me say this. It is true that they weren't regular coalition meetings. And the way in which I became chairman of the coalition opened some wounds which I thought I had to deal with before I actually move in that direction. However, Gap will say, I have always engaged them. The WPA was out. If Keith Scott would know, I always engaged him. And so I felt that I needed to engage the key actors so that we can build back the APNU. When I became leader of the party, the PNC had taken a decision that the 2 small parties that joined or purported to have joined, really and truly, were not really part of the APNU. That in itself generated problems. And you would know that the WPA made a particular demand, which I had to manage. So I would say, yes, there weren't a lot of meetings, but I was gradually working towards a joint opposition and then back to a partnership of national unity once we had the WPA back.
Aubrey Norton there tonight. In case you're just joining us, this is the first part of a 2-part program tonight. Nigel Hughes is going to be here in another half an hour or so. Aubrey, I noticed you didn't speak much about the AFC in that answer, so I'm coming to that. The AFC was part of the broader coalition, and they're still part of the parliamentary coalition. Since Nigel Hughes has thrown his hat in the ring for AFC leader, there has been a discussion both at the level of the elites, but also among people on the ground in the base. And that is the question of a consensus presidential candidate. Many people feel that Nigel's entry into the race for AFC leader has to do with positioning himself or being positioned by supporters to be a contender for the consensus presidential candidate. I understand that there's a motion that is being moved at your Congress to say that you should be the presidential candidate, the consensus presidential candidate for any coalition going forward. Now, I want to pose some specific questions to you.
No, but let me deal with this first piece. I don't know of any motion. I don't know of any motion that would seek to make me a consensus candidate. I know of a motion which says, I understand there's a motion that says that I should be the presidential candidate for the PNCR.
For the PNCR, thanks for that correction, because what is being floated is that the motion seeks to say that you must be the presidential candidate for the coalition. Thanks for that clarification. No,
but I should add as well, consensus can be a very loose word. If the WPA, the PNC, and GAP are talking, and the three agree that the candidate should be the head of GAP, is that necessarily consensus? If the two get together and vote out the one, but the one has 95% of the following, and the two, they do not. I don't know what consensus that will be. You know, it's always a danger extrapolating from one scenario into another. Any talk about presidential candidate has to be weighted. What weight does the particular person or party bring? And then you can discuss and move forward.
Does the PNC under Aubrey Norton leadership, is the PNC under Aubrey Norton leadership prepared to cede the presidential candidate to another party in the coalition, to a member of another party?
All I would say to you, that the PNC membership will speak at this Congress, and if they say that I should be the presidential candidate, who am I to go telling others that I'm going to make them the presidential candidate?
I'm talking about the coalition.
No. What I can do is to say that, look, I have been endorsed by my party. I can involve in discussions, return to my party, and we make a decision on who should be what. But to say I am prepared to concede it, no, I'm a reflection of my party. My party does its work, it is strong. And I don't believe that we should just take the hard work we do and give it to anybody who just fly off of a treetop, land on the ground, and say, you must be the presidential candidate. The consensus can do not forget that I am on the ground. So I know this talk has been going around and where it has originated.
Robert Corbyn, at the 2011 election, steps aside for another PNC leader. There was a tight contest between Mr. Granger and Mr. Greenwich. Mr. Granger won, and so in a sense, Robert stepped aside for Mr. Granger, but he stepped aside for another PNC leader. Are you prepared, if that situation arises, to cede the presidential candidacy to another of your comrades?
Again, I mean, you did political philosophy. Aristotle, said, a comparison among non-equals is no comparison. The situation with Robert Corbyn is he had decided he wasn't running in the 2011 election. So the PNC had to find a candidate because he had conceded that he wouldn't be leader and he needs to see a new leader. In this present situation, I am going to the Congress for the mandate of the PNC. And once the PNC mandates me, then I'm expected to operate based on the mandate of the PNC. I am saying to you, the situation with Robert Corbyn is totally different to the extant situation.
Those of you who are looking for an answer tonight, you all got to wait. You all got to wait. Good evening to all of you and welcome.
Why you say you have to wait? I'm saying to you, the conditions under which Robert voluntarily agreed that he wasn't going to run and he isn't going to be leader, removed him from the scene.
Right.
In that context, Greenwich and Granger contested and Granger emerged. As I understand it, I have some people who are contesting against me. At the end of it, once I am victorious, I have the mandate of the people.
Aubrey, if you win, and you said when you win, but I got to say if you win.
Go ahead. Allow me a little bit of modesty.
Are you prepared to include the other two contenders, Amanza and Roysdale, as part of your governance team within the party?
First thing I would say is this: they are members of parliament. And so at minimum, they have to operate as members of parliament. But the question of their involvement in the government structure is dependent on, after the election, what the central executive of the party decides. You would know that I have said continuously that both persons have potential, and I will acknowledge that. Both persons would tell you that I told them I know the party history and culture, and to do what they were doing was going to cut across the grain of the base. And therefore, I am in no position right now to say I can do this and I can do that. I have to listen to the party membership, and if they say this is how you approach it, I will approach it like that. Or if I feel that their approach is wrong, I will do what I normally engage them and seek to influence in a particular direction. But it would be me being contemptuous of the members of the party to be declaring here what I will do before they actually give me the mandate.
Aubrey, the issue of street protests came up when you were last there, the last two times, and your answer to that question was nuanced, I would say, and it caused some debate that I think is still going on in the country. Would you care to either adjust that answer or reiterate that answer in a clear way so that people can be very, very clear about this question?
Let me reiterate. I believe any opposition political party has to protest. Do not forget, every Tuesday, we protest in front of GCOM, and we have been seeing results. We have just recently engaged the Character Center. We have been involved in other protests. What I am saying is street protests, like we know it in 1997, the conditions at present are not suitable for it. And a lot of people who are calling for street protests are not the people who are going to go on the street and protest. I want to remind people, and you were there in the Quindon Bacchus case, when the people protested and then the PPP go and plug them out and charge 13 of them. Many of the people who were urging protests were prepared to leave those young people in the lockups. And we had to organize and find resources for them. I am saying to you, there are other forms of protests that will achieve our objective. While I don't rule out street protests totally, I do not believe at this stage, particularly heading to an election, it is in the best interest of our party and the people who support us.
Aubrey, on the issue of the oil and gas contract, that has been a controversial issue. You've been steadfast. I would say that your approach has been a pragmatic approach on that question. Do you intend to continue walking that plank, or will you adjust it if and according to you when you're reelected?
Anybody who, in this asymmetry of power, that seeks to unnecessarily antagonize a major oil company, I don't think it would be sensible. Look, Forbes Burnham developed a policy called ownership and control of our resources. and we began to own and control our resources. But very early, we faced the power of the West. I think I said to you the other night in one of our conversations, or gaff, for the want of a better word, that anybody who comes to political parties and seeking political power must be sensible enough to understand the limits of the power, act within it while seeking to increase their power. I was pointing out to somebody in South Africa, Malema might have had one of the best appealing messages, but he did not have the power to take the message past that little grassroots base. What that means, he will be on the fringe with his ideas, while mainstream goes in another direction. As it relates to ExxonMobil, I repeat, there is a clause in the agreement, I think it is Article 31, that allows you to engage Exxon and make changes to the contract. We will do that. But I do not believe in running down the road. It's like somebody said to me, they want me to commit to locking up Jack Dale and Irfan Ali. And I said to them, why will I commit to that? In the last government, people said, oh, we must lock them up. By the time you get to power, you are constrained by a law which says you charge somebody for malfeasance in public office. But the law did not define a minister as a public officer. It speaks to the government officers, permanent secretaries, etc. A recent ruling might contribute to a change, but I do not believe in sensationalism. I believe those in government should be held accountable, but it should not be done in a way in which you create false hope. And then when you actually get government, all the constraints of the law exist. And even if you pass a law to remove the constraints, you can't do it retroactively. Burnham always taught us from his famous statement, it is better to survive sensibly than die a heroic death. A dead hero contributes nothing in practical terms to the society. For me, the PNCR must survive sensibly, keep in focus the interests of the people, make the changes so the people of Guyana can benefit, but avoid all the sensationalism that only gives you kudos on social media, but doesn't help the political struggle in reality.
Aubrey, the question of elections and the electoral machinery is one that you confronted during the local government election, where, in a sense, you had a difficult choice. Do you boycott an election under rules that are not necessarily transparent, or do you participate in those elections? Because if you boycott, the PPP takes control of all the municipalities, including the ones where your base predominate, and so therefore you ended up participating in the election and saving or maintaining control of some of those municipalities and neighborhood councils. Nothing has changed since then. No biometrics has been agreed to. The voters list has remained the same. Elections are due anytime. I mean, the PPP says next year in November, but they could call it anytime. So nothing has changed. How do you convince your people that the elections that are coming are going to be a means towards a change of government if the major changes that you're talking about, clean up voters list, biometrics, are not in place?
You have to work towards a clean voters list. But you also have to work towards if you don't get it. Now, on the question of boycott of election, throughout my studies and teachings at the university, I have looked at the boycott of elections. And the only boycott of elections that they succeed is when you could stop the elections. If we boycott it and could stop it, I'll boycott it. If, however, it is not going to stop, then one has to take a pragmatic decision. Train your people to scrutinize the election, to minimize irregularities. But to make a statement that I will participate or I will boycott wouldn't be helpful. It is dependent on the situation, and we have to prepare for every eventuality. I think it is Sun Tzu, the Chinese strategist, who said, you don't go to war with the soldiers you want or you like. You go to war with the soldiers you have. And so we have got to prepare while at the same time fighting for a clean voters list. I would say to you, I am seeing some motion that I think can result in biometrics and a clean voters list.
Biometrics and a clean voters list. Aubrey, as we wind down this session, I know tomorrow is Congress Day, and it's a big day, and you have to get yourself mentally, psychologically ready. Any closing thoughts as we close out?
All I would say at this stage is that the Congress of the People's National Congress reform is on. All the mechanisms are in place. I can say to you, it is transparent and will be accountable. And that in our case, when people are voting, it will be in the view of all our delegates at the Congress. It is my sincere hope that we become involved in proper discussions, especially when we come to the section on the way forward, when a lot of the issues you raise will come up. I think we'll have meaningful discussions and we'll chart a way for the party to proceed in the coming years. I want to say thanks for having me, and thanks to all those who support the People's National Congress reform having elections. Let us not forget, people were calling for elections since December. And when elections are called, they then ask some more time. I find it strange.
Aubrey Norton, my brother, thank you very much for coming on tonight and clarifying a number of things for the audience and saying it as you see it. Good luck over the weekend. And of course, win, lose, or draw, we'll have you back.
One of the things I should say is at a personal level, Nigel Hughes and I have a very good relationship.
Nigel Hughes and Aubrey Norton have a very good relationship.
All
the best, Aubrey.
Thank you.
Aubrey Norton here tonight, and we're expecting Mr. Hughes to join us anytime. Anytime now, Mr. Hughes is going to join us as we continue to cover the Congress of the the PNC and the AFC. We'll take a short break and then be back with Nigel Hughes.
The youths were all in a quandary, no sense of direction. They lost all hope cause they just can't cope. They're ready yet, but they're gone. They have no respect for their elders, no respect for themselves also. Their spirits were all in tatters and reading an all-time low. Then I hear them this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them of the wrath to come, and if you hear him, bye-bye, revelation time. This is revelation. This is revelation. I want them of the wrath. You're gonna get want them of the wrath to come. Leaders were fighting each other. They were tearing the people apart. Friends who used to live happy together, now hatred filling their hearts. Neighbors were cursing neighbors. Whole villages in mayhem. I heard they were listening deceitful leaders who were preaching for doctrine to them. Look, compassion went out of the window. Deviousness reigned instead. Morality was low, 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 but the people were spiritually dead. But the old man beat it wrong. The old man beat it wrong. He said, take this melody, God, go to your country, warn them of the wrath. And if you hear, warn them of the wrath. Revelation, you know what he tell me? He said, "Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills, and everywhere. Oh, tell it on the mountain." The old man beat his drum. The youths were all in a quandary, no sense of direction. They lost all hope cause they just can't cope. They're already yet, but they're gone. They have no respect for their elders, no respect for themselves also. Their spirits were all in tatters and reading an all-time low. Then I hear them cussing the system. They're cussing the leaders too. But they were raping, stealing, shooting and looting, because they all had nothing else to do. The old man beat it drum. The old man beat it drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them of the road to come and warn them of the road to come. We're gonna get revelation time. This is revelation. This is revelation. Warn them of the road to come. He said, talk to your spiritual leaders. Tell them get on their knees and pray. To get rid of all these karmas that driving good spirits away. Then he tell me, talk to your fellow Calypsonians. Tell them stop the shame and disgrace. Encouraging people to get on and jump up and mash up the place. But behold, I saw the sunrise coming over the mountain range. The old man said, that is a symbol of hope if your people get serious and change. But the old man beat it drum. The old man beat it drum. He said, take this melody, girl, What to your country, warn them of the wrath of God. And if you do,
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. The spirituality coming through here tonight. I can feel the spirit. Singing Sandra Devines, my girl. Spiritualism full there. Warn them of the road to come. Warn them of the road to come. Black people, you all know, you all fuss at the start. Because, what is it? Charity begins at home. We are changing course. We're not going down that road anymore. We walk in the conscious road. We walk in the conscious road. Guyanese of all races, we can't do what we're doing. We can't get the government just messing up, filtering up the state, using the state in the worst way. Oh no. Oh no. Thank you all so much for staying with us tonight. We just had the opposition leader of the PNC, Aubrey Norton. Now we're going to have another friend of this program. I call him the People's Senior Counselor. You all know who we're talking about. Well, the old Calypsonians say, I know the man, you know the man. All of we know the man.
Hello.
My brother, Nigel, how are you?
David, good night.
Yes,
as always, a pleasure, an absolute pleasure to be on your program.
Wonderful. Nigel,
are you hearing me clearly?
Yes, I'm hearing you very, very clearly. And Nigel, this is going to be a program with a little bit of difference because you are now in a role that is uncharacteristic, but let's see where we go. A few years ago, you resigned as chairman of the AFC, and you said you're done with politics. Many of us felt it was a premature decision because we felt at the time that you really had a lot to offer at that level of politics. Now, years later, I am presuming that you've been persuaded to in a sense, go back on that word. You know, it reminds me of, there's a story of, we had an activist in the WPA, Rockcliffe, Ezzy Rockcliffe brother, you know, and he was carrying on with the brothers one day that they were wrong. That brother Walter Rodney had this position. And if Walter had the position, then the position was the right position. And up walked Walter Rodney. And Rockcliffe turned and said, Brother Walter, did you not have this position? And Walter said, I changed my mind. I changed my mind. Nigel, why you change your mind?
Boy, long story.
Right.
Long story.
We got time.
No, I don't want to bore your audience with the whole story. I left the AFC where we had some internal difficulties on a point of principle. If you want to hear that, you can hear that. And I decided that I was leaving politics. It was the second time I resigned, actually. And I was going to contribute to the people of Guyana in the way I could, and which was to go to them when they were in difficult circumstances, wherever that is, and lend the skills that I had. I'm a lawyer. And I'd been doing that before, just to give you context there, but I came back to Ghana in 1988. As soon as I came back, I was involved in GUARD. The campaign then was for free and fair elections. I was involved. The Ghana Human Rights actually invited me, my first outing, to help the people of Tiger Bay, because in those days you have the quick reaction group, the Death Squad, and they were killing people left, right, and center. And I used to go into Tiger Bay. We had regular sessions just to tell the young men, particularly, how to deal with the police when they got arrested so that they wouldn't get killed. The interesting stories there, but to come back to where it is. So I left in 2016, decided that I could help. I will dedicate myself to help where I can. I'd advocate. And there have been a series of incidents. Henry Boyce during the last election, I think you will remember, as soon as the coalition got into government in May or June 2015, they started to remove the vendors from Stabroek Market. Those are the women who had carried that struggle for over 15 years. They used to go down the street. They protested, all those market vendors. I remember those women particularly. And it was the decision of the government to go and remove them one night. They didn't even give them notice. And I thought, this is crazy. This is not what I'm about. This is not what we fought for. We can't go now. You just got into office and start removing market vendors off of Stabroek. What kind of story is that? These are the people who made sacrifices that were greater than anybody else in the movement. They were consistently there, consistently brutalized. And I began to pick up some elements that I was uncomfortable with. It went on and on. And then after 2016, when people needed me, I'd be available. You might remember the GGMC had gone into Marudi Mountains and removed all those indigenous people. And that video of the woman lying on the ground holding her baby being whipped by one of the officers of GGMC, those people pooled in money, came out to get me and took me into Aishalton. I remember going in there, I got a heart attack in there. Forever grateful to the people of Guyana for having prayed for me. Because these things, David, you'd call it spiritual. Sometimes it's just a calling. And you might run from it, but over and over, people in difficult circumstances came because they thought I perhaps could help them. And this had nothing to do with politics. When the government was there and they appeared to be abusing their power, I was there for them. Both sides of the political fence, all three sides. And so we come to 2024, and I always my mom used to tell me as a kid, to whom much is given, much is expected. And I know the sacrifice her parents made and her grandparents made just to be able to afford them a better life. And it more and more it dawned on me, people of course would always say you should consider it, that I don't want to leave this planet and say that I never actually took the decision to help the people of Guyana when I had the opportunity to do it. Guyana has been extremely kind to me. I heard your previous guest describe me as aristocratic. I didn't know we had aristocrats in Guyana, but it has been particularly kind to me. My parents have more than sacrificed to afford me what they have. And I think if I can contribute, and when I say I mean I as a part of a team, this is not a Nigel Hughes thing. This is a country thing. Guyana needs a break. I'm not saying I'm the magician that will give it the break, but I certainly think I have ideas, like several people, about how we can actually fashion a new modern Guyana that will give everybody a fair shot, not what we're seeing now. And I really believe, I said this when I was, I think, interviewed by Dennis Chabral, the country is at perhaps its most precarious position. You think that might be a contradiction because you think we have the most resources available to us now, we have more money than we have ever had before, but we are at a precipice. If we don't get this right, the kind of difficulties we will face, I mean, Trinidad is just moderate compared to what will happen here as a result of the misallocation of the resources, the misallocation of the bounty that we are enjoying. Just to give you a staggering statistic, David, the World Health Organization this year, I think it's 3 or 4 weeks ago, said that 20% of our children are living in extreme food poverty. That is a staggering statistic. That's 1 in every 5. The government's reaction to that statistic is not to say we are in crisis, let's go and deal with it. Their reaction to that is the figures are wrong. The World Health used the wrong criteria. The figures are dated. Even if the figures are wrong, David, how could we have, if it's now 1 in 5, 1 in 6 children in food poverty? They're not getting the necessary nutriments. And if you think of that, it means they will not be able to do well in school because they will have the deficiency. They'll always be semi-hungry. They can't absorb. They will barely going to primary school. They will finish primary school, probably, not a startling statistic, 48% of the students who go to secondary school don't finish. So they're definitely not going to finish high school. And then they come onto a job market, which in an oil economy, they don't have the skills. Therefore, they will not get the better jobs. They're condemned to a life of low existence economically, socially, and all the other consequences. And you know that young men are not going to accept that. And if they have no other way of being able to participate in the society, and they're going to be seeing people driving fancy cars, Maseratis and Ferraris, and they're condemned to poverty and hanging on the side of the street and dealing with getting involved in criminal activity, it's only a matter of time before that turns into a cancerous criminal situation, and then you can't control it, because the only way you're going to believe you can control it is with using more guns, and you end up exactly where Trinidad is. And for me, if I can attempt to persuade people in Guyana that we can actually build a decent, equitable, fair society in which all of us have a chance, then I would do it. Last point on that is that right now, if 1 in 2 students is not finishing high school, what are we doing to train them? I mean, all those, if we take as a cohort, the women, the indigenous people, what are we doing to give them skills that they can go onto the market and make money? So are we training them, for example, to install solar panels, to fix solar panels so that they can go into their communities in the case of the indigenous, and they're trained and they can ply their trade? We need very creative ideas about how we're going to deal with the rising levels of poverty. And that's the problem. And that essentially is what is motivating me.
That's precisely what is motivating you. Nigel, let me ask you this question, because it's a controversial question, yet it's a question that's on people's minds. Aubrey suggested that you're aristocratic. It is not a characteristic that I subscribe to, but you're clearly part of the elite in our society. And by elite, I mean those of us who have a disproportionate amount of the resources that are, whether it's education. In my case, for example, I'm a part of the education elite. I mean, not less than 5% of the Guyanese population has a PhD. I do. And so disproportionately when it comes to certification, I'm part of the elite. They're cultural elites. Those boys who play in cricket and so on, and making all them billions, they're part of the sporting elite. You are the top of your profession. So you are part of the elite. And you are running against someone, Sherrod Duncan, who's not considered to be part of that elite. Our society has always struggled with what is called the expectations that it's the elite that will run our politics. Lloyd Bess, the Trinidadian economist, used to refer to the doctor politics, where the elites, the doctors, the lawyers, and so on, the professionals are the ones who have a kind of entitlement to controlling our politics. How do you respond to that criticism, that the fact that you have come back and you've entered the race for leadership, in a sense, it's about throwing your elite weight around?
Wow. All right. I prefer to put it this way. If you say to me that I was born to parents who were professionals, my mother was a historian, had a master's, my father was a lawyer, yes. If you say to me I went to one of the more privileged schools at the time, St. Margaret's, yes. I went to Saints and the priests were still there, absolutely. Then I went to Bishop Sixth Form, top school, absolutely. I was fortunate enough to have a father who could afford to send me to university in the United Kingdom. Yes, that's a fact. None of us, rich, poor, in between, none of us control where we were born. We don't get judged on where we land on this planet. We get judged with what we do with the talents we have. And when I say talents, I don't mean money. What we do with the gifts we have and how we use that, not only for our personal benefit, but for the benefit of others. And I will say this, in the African society, education has always been a criteria by which they judge persons. And there are a lot of people who are educated, as you know, David, but they don't necessarily apply that in the best way. Whether you go to Mr. Burnham, Mr. Burnham is a lawyer. Mr. Burnham went to exactly the same university, same college as I did. Or I should say, I went to the same university and college as he did, University College London. Whether you go to Mr. Hoyt after him, whether you go to Mr. Granger, you can say that all of us came from a history in which our families valued education. So yes, I plead guilty to that. If you're saying to me that I have a disproportionate advantage compared to Mr. Duncan, I would simply say this. All that I have brought to this debate by offering myself as a nominee for leadership is a competition of ideas. That's all I bring. I do not bring, oh, I'm a big lawyer. I do not bring, look, I have done X, Y, and Z. I bring a competition of ideas about how this country can move forward. And I have very clear, specific ideas about what Guyana needs to do now to, first of all, avoid the precipice it seems to be going over, but more importantly, how we create a modern, inclusive society. That's all I bring to the debate. As a matter of fact, during this competition, when I realized things are getting really nasty, I'm not in the chats in the party because I'm not an active member of the Alliance for Change, but the various chats. I called Mr. Duncan. I said, look, we got to meet. This is getting out of hand. We can't allow, the people who support us to be engaging in this kind of behavior. This is just not acceptable. We met, and then we met again last night. And I said, look, if we can't agree on a common slate, let's at least commit to keep it clean. We owe the people of Guyana this. This is not about the competition for who wins the leadership. This is us being able to offer the people of Guyana the best ideas and pathways to be able to take the country forward. So yes, I may be those things, but that's not the basis upon which I am competing. And I would say to any Alliance for Change, vote tomorrow. Don't vote for me because I am Nigel Hughes, the lawyer, or because you think somehow or the other I have superior network capacities. If you don't agree with what I am advancing as the ideas to take Guyana forward, then I'm not your candidate. It's important.
Frankly spoken there by Nigel Hughes. Nigel, you are vying for the leadership of a party that prided itself and perhaps still prides itself on being a party that appealed to people across the ethno-racial spectrum. I don't like using these days the word multiracial because multiracial means anything and everything to people. But certainly the AFC prided itself on a party that reaches all the different ethnic groups. In 2006, the predominant electoral support came from African Guyanese. In 2011, I think that flipped. Indian Guyanese were attracted to the party, but the party can say that it has passed muster as a party that appealed to all ethnic groups. Now, given the way our politics have developed, your activism in recent times in defending the poor and the powerless took you predominantly into the African Guyanese communities, although people forget that you continued to be active among indigenous peoples. That is lost a lot on people. But it is clear that you, in pursuit of the fight for justice, and because of the way in which African Guyanese have been treated by this government, because of structural reasons African Guyanese have been under assault, it appears that you spend most of your activism in that community. And some people are arguing that that goes against the multiracial grain of the AFC and that your leadership of the party would reduce it to a black party. Please respond to that.
I actually I want to start by asking you a question,
Yeah.
which is this. So, is the argument that if the African people are in the most acute circumstances, they are in the most deprived economic circumstances, and the construct of the country is such that they are, by structure, excluded and deprived, that I should not go and assist them because it may create an impression that it's Afrocentric. Now, in the finest traditions of the leader of your party, Mr. Walter Rodney, you have to go where people need you and are oppressed. And I don't believe that the true Indian supporter, even of the PPP, believes that my actions were driven by a racist motive. If people are in difficult circumstances and they're hurting or they're being treated unfairly, you will remember during the APNU AFC government, after I departed, matter of fact, before I departed, when they were going after their political opponents and running them down to the police station and running them down to Silku, I got called and I went. I didn't say that, oh, they don't deserve this. I have spent nights in my Bikuri in the homes of small holding farmers when they were difficulties, when they're having problems with the Water Users Association. And so the fact that the two Henry boys got slaughtered in the back dam in the middle of a political crisis, I don't know if people are saying to me, I either should not have gone or because I went, I am somehow an African activist. If the victims of oppression have a particular hue, that's where I go. Similarly with the indigenous. I haven't gone to the indigenous. I went to the indigenous long before I even got involved in politics. So it is my approach insofar as people have their hands tied. I mean, you will remember Shaka Blair. Shaka Blair got shot in front of his wife and children. And that led to all that happened up the East Coast. I will go. So I don't think the fact that I have spent a lot of time attempting to bring justice for people who, because the structure puts them there, you can call them underserved. If you have a disproportionate number of Africans in the underserved or not served community, it doesn't make you racist because you go to help them change their circumstances. That are here not because of anything you have done wrong or your parents have done wrong. You're here because the system intends to keep you right here. And it's important that you understand why you're here. So I hear that answer, but I will only say, look across the board. Very few people from the PPP who seek to cast me in that light. Remember that I, as an African Guyanese in 1988, when I came back, and in 1989, when the PPP was fighting for free and fair elections, and when Yesu Prasad, Nanda Gopal, Sam Hines, and myself spoke on the platform at the parade ground against what would have been described as an African government headed by Desmond Hoyt, who was very close to personal best friend of my father. So somehow they don't remember that. And that's long before the present vice president or the present president and several of the ministers, probably most of them were in high school, even got involved in the struggle. So here you have an African young lawyer then on the same platform calling for free and fair elections with an African government in power. And they were not around. I hate to do this, but I just say to them, where was their commitment to the struggle then? That's all I was saying there.
Nigel Hughes here tonight, answering questions about his candidacy for leader of the AFC. Nigel, as you know, resigned as chairman of the ANC, AFC some years back, but he continued to be active, as he said, using his skills and his talents to witness on behalf of the poor and the powerless in our society. He has thrown his hat in the ring to become leader of the AFC. Nigel, we have entered a new era. I happen to have been on the platform at the Friendship Primary School in August of 2018. It's almost 6 years ago. Professor Clive Thomas created quite a story when he made the announcement of what today is known as cash transfer, what he calls the Buxton.
Absolutely.
You were on that stage. I was there. I think I was the moderator. There was a representative of the Ministry of Energy at that time. We had invited Minister Raphael Trotman. He couldn't make it. He sent a representative. But after Dr. Thomas's presentation, you raised some questions. And for me, as I remember it, the central question that you raised is whether, in fact, our country is prepared for what is coming. Meaning, a petrol state, are we sociological? Are we politically prepared? I don't think you were poo-pooing Dr. Thomas's proposal, but you were sounding the bell. At least that's what I took away from it. And here we are 6 years later. I think you've been proven correctly. David, you're a man of culture and music and so on. And David Rudder has this song that this calypso that he sang as we were moving into the 21st century. It's called 1990. And he said, please make a liar of me, because he was predicting that Black people were going to be in the same boat as we move into the 20th. He was predicting what is happening to African Guyanese in Guyana today. And he was doing this in 1999. And he was saying, please make a liar of me. And I think I heard you saying that on that stage, on that August afternoon. Here you are, 6 years later, running for leadership of one of the major political parties. I'm asking you this direct question that I've asked everyone who's been here this week. What kind of political party you envisage that is needed to meet the challenges of our time for our country?
First of all, thank you very much for that question. I just want to go back to what you said about that meeting that we had in Buxton with Professor Thomas was there. I have come around to the view that direct transfers is not a major part of the solution, but we must have direct transfers. And I just want to address it because at the time I reacted adversely to Professor Thomas. But let me just say this. If you leave the politicians of any class to distribute at will as a discretionary measure, drive through a city and you give people $250,000, you go give the sugar workers, you don't give the African workers when you got flood relief, your system will be abused by the politicians because it is born on that concept of the privilege of the politician to distribute the nation's wealth as if it's their own. We need to enshrine in statutory form direct transfers to every citizen. Our fear was that, people will take this and they may not necessarily act in their own best interest. But after seeing what has happened and how this distribution has been so abused and so vulgarly abused, you flood relief, you're giving to one set of people who support you, you're not giving it to the next, the sort of resentment that is built up. I believe in cash transfers. However, for me, if I am lucky enough on Saturday and I am elected as leader, I would like to persuade, or will attempt to persuade, the Alliance for Change that human development must be at the core, absolute core of Guyana's future. We have to develop our human capacity. That has to be fundamentally the social and economic development of our citizenry, primary. We then have to fashion, we also have to be fiscally responsible. So it's not a case where we are just going to distribute this largesse. We have to be fiscally responsible. So the principle of human development is going to be the core. We have to look at the data, and then we have to fashion policies and train our people so that they get skills that will allow them to survive. And at the same time, develop their political consciousness. I think you and I had a conversation before that if you compare the political consciousness of the late 70s in Guyana, when the WPA was at the fore and Walter was around, to where it is today, is chalk and cheese. I know a lot has changed, but in the 70s, people understood what the struggle was about. Today, people are at the stage where money has to be made. Let's call it money got to make. And it doesn't matter how that money has to make. And by pursuing that, you don't realize that you are hurtling this society to a stage where it is going to implode. It is absolutely going to implode. Everybody talks about the tensions, and we talk about the racial tensions, but there are serious economic tensions in the country. It just happens that poverty is more located in one ethnic group. But I will say this, if you drive off of the main road in Indian areas, you will see a level of poverty that a lot of people don't know exists. That poverty is by and large hidden because the party to which they have for which they have traditionally voted have adopted a policy that says everything is great and wonderful and we're building roads. But the poverty in a lot of those Indian villages, serious. If you go to Berbice, ask the average sugar worker, other than when they're doing the cash grants distribution, how is he planning the future for his son or his daughter? And how is he going to participate in this Guyana given this present structure? There are no contractors living in the back of Albion. There are no contractors living in the back of Rose Hall, but they're finding it difficult. But because of our politics, they can't afford to complain, because what is presented to them is if it's not us, it's them people, and you know what will happen. So we have some real major problems. But to come back to your question, human capital development, fiscal responsibility. And I mean, there are a whole measure of things that I believe should be done. And we have to make sure that when we come to our fiscal responsibility, we are driven by what the data says. If the data says that 5 out of 6 persons who have licenses to export gold come from one group, then we have to adopt a policy to rectify that. You can't go back and change it. Nobody's saying go and take away anything from anybody, but you have to get a policy that rectifies it. After I published Economy and Justice, nobody in the government challenged the accuracy of its content. But not a single policy has been adopted to redress what is clearly an imbalance. And unless we get responsible, this has only got one outcome, and it's not a happy one.
Nigel, and thanks for that question, that answer to the question. You have taken a strong position on the question of equality and equitable distribution of our resources. Economy and Justice was really a landmark work in terms of putting the data together, putting the actual numbers together, and making it so graphic that one can no longer say, where is the evidence? Where is the evidence? Now, the AFC has been rather quiet on the question of public protest. Mr. Norton, on this program a couple of weeks ago, was give a nuanced answer on the role of public street protests in contemporary Guyana. As I said, the AFC has been silent on that question. As you vie for the leadership of that party, how do you see the role of public protests? Norton is saying that one has to be very careful with it for a number of reasons. Where you stand and how would you situate the party? Because there is a criticism of the AFC that it has been playing it safe and it has really not come out strongly on the side of those who are being oppressed in the country. And it has stayed off, and that there's the perception that it is not in favor of street protest.
Okay, my first answer to that would be this, and I don't speak for the FC, but I'll attempt to offer an extra. The two other parties, the People's National Congress and the PPP, are mass-based parties. That's how they started. They started with unions and they had a mass base. So they always had the muscle that can put people on the street, whether for an industrial purpose or whether for a political purpose. The AFC did not start as a mass-based party, and the AFC is not a mass-based party. So we start from a disadvantage, forgive me, to this extent. It may change, but if we call a protest, we don't have that kind of muscle at this particular point in time. I think this is going to change rapidly, but we don't have that muscle to put anybody on the street. So I think a lot of the decision making on protests would be if a protest is called, the most we could do is we subscribe to the principle. We don't have the 5,000 people, or we didn't have the 5,000 people to put on the street. We probably, hopefully, will be able to do that. But I will say this about protests and politics. I don't believe that you should ever surrender part of your artillery, which is the ability to protest, as a political movement. So my first question is, my first response would be, I don't think that I would advocate that we can say no protest. Having said that, I think that like any other tool in your political armory, you have to be strategic and you have to use it when it can be most effective. There are a lot of other tools, and what we've discovered recently is the government, even though it may opt to ignore internal protests as its policies and its actions, they are exceedingly vulnerable to international pressure. So that people go where they get the best results. So that means now that political parties in Guyana, as much as they educate their followers, they also have to use as part of their artillery engaging with foreign bodies, taking people to the International Human Rights Courts, taking people to the Inter-American Human Rights Commission, bringing the matters that affect citizens domestically to the United Nations and other bodies. If you notice, an awful lot of time is spent by most of the political parties trying to speak to influential people in the United States. And the only reason for that is that we have lost the ability and the maturity as a people to speak to each other. So we go to people who have influence over each other who are outside of Guyana. And so it's a sad, you can imagine Burnham and Jagan running out of the country to get the other side to talk. It just means that we have reached such a stage where we no longer speak to each other. The political atmosphere in Guyana is such we don't engage. It's as if we live in two different countries. And so people then go internationally, and we have to go. And the consequence of that is that the country gets embarrassed because you get decisions from the Inter-American Human Rights Commission. You have the country. The truth then comes to the fore. You will know the African National Congress in the 70s and 80s concentrated a lot of their efforts internationally. People started to boycott South African products prior to manufacturing as in the 1980s, because internationally South Africa couldn't battle. They can't shoot the international concern. So you boycotted sports, you boycotted their products, you had to hit them in the economy. And that's precisely the same position people are arriving at in Guyana, because the political class does not respond and does not have the ability to speak to each other in the best interest of the country. But certainly, I wouldn't say protest should be taken off of the table.
Nigel, the AFC when it came on the scene in 2006, it's one of its mantras was we are not joining with any of the big parties, and then Corbyn called the WPA, and they managed to put together the APNU, and the AFC altered its position, adjusted its position. It joined the APNU in what became known as the APNU-FC coalition, and they won the election in terms of the parliamentary seats in 2011, and in 2015 they won the presidency and the government, and of course a parliamentary majority. Since then, since the 2020 election, the WPA has walked away from the APNU. The AFC remains part of the coalition at the parliamentary level, but outside of parliament, the party has opted out of the coalition. Questions. As leader of the AFC, would you recommit the party to coalition politics? One, and how you intend to contribute to rebuilding that broad political front that you spoke about. I think I read it in your interview with the Demerara Waves. You were talking about your conditions, and you listed one condition as being, and I'm not using your words here, but as a broad opposition front that ultimately leads to a national government. Talk to us about that issue, the issue
Sure.
of coalition politics.
Okay, first thing, David, for me, we came out of power in 2020. I have not heard, and I can't speak for any other party, but I certainly have not heard the Alliance for Change having conducted any sort of post-2020 examination of why it reached the stage of losing power, which to me is fundamental. You can't go forward if you don't look at your previous mistakes and find out what it is that you did incorrectly and how you can correct that. Now, I'm not saying going into a coalition was incorrect, but we have to examine it, because we, as a political party, can't talk about going forward and discussing coalitions if we don't know why it didn't work. It may have worked. Now, when the Alliance for Change took the decision to go into a coalition, it was not an easy decision for the members and the supporters of the Alliance for Change. As a matter of fact, the party was split on it. And I think I believe the numbers will show that the Alliance for Change lost a lot of its support that time. If our, I don't want to say postmortem, but if our examination from the start discloses certain things, we have to address that. After they got in, the support for the coalition was at a high. That evaporated very rapidly in a year. I think by the time, at the end of 2016, that sort of buoyancy that we enjoyed when we got into power started to evaporate. And we have to look at what were the missteps that were taken that led to that. How did the coalition itself work internally? All those things have to be looked at. The Working People's Alliance walked away from the coalition because I remember hearing yourself particularly saying that you were not being heard. So all those things, for me, I would encourage the party to examine, because we can't go forward with the risk of repeating the same errors going forward. No. I absolutely believe, as a matter of principle, that we need to involve the broadest coalition and collection of people to decide how this country goes forward politically and to identify what is the best vehicle for taking it forward. We have civil society who must play a critical role in talking about the future of this country. The future of this country, and I heard it mentioned some of these programs the other day, the fact that two parties control 90% of the vote. therefore those two parties should determine between them the future of the country, displays by that thought a certain approach. We are in crisis, David. We need the broadest, we need to consult, and that's the other thing that I want the party to do, to consult with as many people across the country about their vision of the future, what it is that they consider fundamental, and we will talk about policies that draw upon what they have said and are fashioned to be able to deliver for Guyana. We can't, for example, have a winner-take-all in a multi-ethnic, multicultural society. Absolutely not. We know if there's one disaster that we have had since 1966, is the winner-take-all politics. It completely alienates people. And this political process where the two major parties who find their principal support in ethnic politics put up somebody else and they can't say that they are predominantly African or predominantly Indian, has led to candidates who appear to be weak if they're from the opposite group. What I can say without a doubt is winner take all cannot continue, and we cannot talk about the future of Guyana where the president wins 50.5% of the vote, 51, 52%. We must have a president, whether voted by the members of the National Assembly or by direct vote, that enjoys 60%. That forces coalitions. We cannot exclude the possibility of a coalition after the election, because that is a better way to determine how the views of more people are taken into account. Now you have the ridiculous position where the president runs around saying, oh, I'm speaking for everybody else and I'm building, I represent everybody. When the mere fact that he has to go and pick up African people and hold them up and say, hey, this is a special successful one, what are you complaining about? A president who enjoys 60% of the support of the populace or the National Assembly is not going to pursue policies that only benefit his supporters. By force, he's going to have to take into account the views of somebody else other than his party. Suriname has coalitions with 7 and 8 parties. That is the only way. It may slow the process, but it's the only way in a multi-ethnic society. If you had a homogeneous society, that's a different thing. And Guyana we cannot afford to go to 70 years old or 60 years old when we get there. With this foolishness that you have 50% of the vote and therefore you're entitled to all the power and you don't have to consult, or that you can insult the people by saying, oh, I'm consulting you by calling you up or, going through the motions. The teacher strike is absolutely ridiculous. The most important thing about the future of this country is education. The only way you are going to get an educational system that is going to deliver superior students across the board, not at your top institutions only, not at those top 5 schools, but the mean across the board has to go to that level to be able to function in an oil economy, is by starting off by making sure that you have the best teachers that are available. You can't get the best teachers unless you remunerate them. Teachers can't perform if they're teaching in school and then they have to go and do extra lessons afterwards to try and live a basic life. They need to be remunerated at the level at which they are going to have the time to dedicate themselves to those students to teach within the curriculum. One of the proposals I wish to offer to the party is that we should build high quality neighborhoods, housing areas, not these things you give people 5,000 square feet, high quality neighborhoods that have parks, not just playing field. And we say to teachers, you have a 30-year mortgage. It's below the standard interest rates. You get your duty-free vehicle. You have all the utilities in the neighborhoods in which they live. But your commitment is, we set the criteria. You have to make sure 80% of your students get whatever it is, grade 1s and 2s. You have to understand that you will be constantly monitored on the delivery of the education product to the students. That means the training for those, we have to put a lot of money into the training of those teachers. We have to upgrade the Cyril Potter. University, you have to pour money into research into those areas which the country is likely to need as it goes forward. And it's got to be a long-term plan. So the teachers don't have to sweat income. They don't have to sweat housing. They don't have to sweat transportation. Their children, and they grow up in an area which is, world class. They've got the parks, etc. But their commitment is not to make sure that students just pass, but you got to ensure that 80% of your cohort, whether they're in Essequibo, whether they're in Berbice, whether they're in Georgetown, whether they're in an urban area, rural, you have to deliver. Otherwise, what the state is providing to you will no longer continue. So it's got to be incentivized, and we have to make sure we put them there. To think that we will have an education system where the incentive is teach so much in school, but you got to run the extra lessons to live. Crazy. I have seen teachers who dedicated their lives to teaching have to do extra lessons, not because they want to do it, they can't make it. And we have to remove them from that position. And you nickel and diming them over salaries? It must mean that you don't have a vision, that if you think it is politically expedient to nickel and dime teachers over salaries, when this is the single most important, this is the most important, how do I describe this? This is the most important aspect of our development, the education of the children. If you want a sophisticated, high-end society, it gotta start with education. Your kids can't be dropping out in school at the rate of 50%. And talk about it.
Nigel Hughes here tonight answering some questions as they relate to his candidacy for leader of the AFC. Nigel, as leader of the AFC, are you going to urge the party to renegotiate the contract if it gets into power by itself or with other parties? The oil contract I'm talking about with Exxon.
David, I will say this, and I think I said it the other night on Rickford's program. Exxon is a client of our firm. I'm making it public now, so nobody can say that I have never made it. Several of the oil companies are clients of our firm. I cannot comment on that. What I have said is that I will set up committees, and if we get into government, commissions that are specifically dedicated to dealing with oil generally. I will insist that they hire the best professional advice internationally, both in terms of law, in terms of economics, and in terms of the business of oil, because the business of oil is the most sophisticated business on the planet because it runs the planet. This is not a case where you could wake up today, one man, and have a bright idea and decide you're going to implement it. I think I heard Mr. Norton earlier saying, one of the things Mr. Burnham said is that you have to take full account of what's happening internationally. And that's why, for me, one of the fundamental things for this country going forward is you have to have a state planning secretariat or a commission, which is going to map the future of this country at least in 15, 20-year cycles. And we have to get the best research persons and the best educated persons into those commissions and that state planning so that they can assess exactly how it is that we are going to go forward. We can't decide we're building roads. If you look at if you look at, I think it was last year, the vice president said that from the National Resource Fund, they withdrew more than 90% of it. Who on earth takes 90% of their income and spends it? You haven't put anything into investment. You haven't had the best money and finance advisors, money managers advising you as to what you do. And certainly in terms of what percentage of money you're putting into infrastructure, what percentage of money you're putting into education. And the most fundamental thing about roads, generally internationally, is you tend to build roads to where your resources are so you can get them to port quicker, cheaper, without the least amount of disruption as you can. I haven't heard about roads going up the Cuyuni, the Mazaruni, Northwest. Even the road from Kurupukari to Letham is not agreed. So how are we going forward as a country where these basic things are not in place? So we have real issues to discuss. And this is now, and I want to say this, God willing, if the Alliance for Change ends up in government, either on its own or as part of a group, even if we win 55 or 57% of the vote, even if we have a 60% of the vote, the first thing I would do is call the head of the other political party and say, let's sit down. Let's talk about agreeing on 4 areas of the government in a fundamental way for 10 years or 15 years. So we're not going to argue. Let's agree on an educational plan. We could think about it at every election and say, you might put a school here, but let's agree the fundamentals of that. Let's agree the fundamentals of the economic development plan for the country. We could think it here, we can think it there, but the fundamentals are there. So whether the Alliance for Change is in government or you're in government, we are at least know that we have agreed the fundamentals. That sends a very powerful signal to the markets, the international markets. It brings stability. It means there's a committed plan. If you want to invest $2 billion in Guyana, you know that this is their plan for the next 10 years. It gives you that stability. Investment is absolutely important. Right now, anyway, that's so 2, foreign affairs. We are so vulnerable in foreign affairs simply because we don't have the military capacity to deter Venezuela. We have to find the capacity to be able to deter them. That doesn't mean that we have to put more troops on the border, but we have to explore military options that will cause Venezuela to think twice, because the pain we can inflict, we might be able to defeat them, but the pain that we can inflict will not be worth them attempting to do something about it. And this is even after we get the decision, because we have to be prepared. When we get a favorable decision, that does not mean that Venezuela is going to cease the course of action it has clearly been pursuing. So education, the economy, foreign affairs, and health. We have to make sure that the health system we have is driven by the disaggregated data. So we just don't jump up and say, oh, we put in hospitals in all the regions. We have to look at where the specific needs are. If there's a diabetic problem in region 8, but the problems in region 6 are of a different nature, we have to be able to agree some fundamental methodologies for identifying where we are going to put those resources in health. So those 4 areas, and then we can argue about everything else. You can argue about wages and whatever.
Nigel, you must be hearing the debates that are going on right across the country once you announce your candidacy for leader of the AFC. You have indicated that you are open to being part of a coalition, the AFC, being part of a coalition going forward.
But broad coalition.
A broad coalition.
Very broad coalition, yeah.
Are you open to being a consensus candidate, presidential candidate for that broad coalition if it comes to fruition?
David, I'll answer that this way. I am open to doing whatever the people of Guyana think is in their best interest in advancing this country. If in that process I am identified as the person or one of a group of persons to lead that process, I am open to it. What I will say to you is the idea of consensus candidate has no structure to it, because other than saying I'm the candidate or somebody else the candidate, it doesn't have a political structure to it. And the question then becomes, what is the vehicle that you're going to use going forward? Does the consensus candidate have the ability to influence the various parties in the group that has agreed that he or she may be the consensus candidate? And that becomes a problem, because in Guyana, everything is horse trading. I did hear my colleague, who's the leader of the People's National Congress in this program before, say that if I'm bringing X number of votes to the coalition, then I suppose that has to be reflected in the number of seats or the power exercise. And my personal view on that is that to deliver to Guyana should always be at the front of our at the forefront of our thought. It's not a question of the weight you necessarily carry. It is the power of the ideas to transform. So let's take the Working People's Alliance, for example. If the Working People's Alliance have put forward a progressive developmental plan based on developing the human resources as a priority for Guyana, I am not going to say David Hines, sorry, Doc, how many votes you bring into this? That's not the basis of the discussion. We are talking about Guyana. And if we're talking about Guyana, we're talking about what are the policies and the ideas that will move it forward. Now, because we have been trapped in this race thing, then, the small parties get squeezed out. But the Working People's Alliance, and I would argue this any time, especially in the 70s, were at the forefront of the intellectual revolution of the country. They didn't have free and fair elections in those days, but they didn't necessarily have the numerical support to be able to do it. So we have to reach the stage where we start the discussion about Guyana. What is in the best interest? And we start the discussion about the ideas. Now, of course, you cannot ignore the political reality that maybe one or two of the parties will bring more electoral support to advancing those policies. But when we're having the discussion about it, that's a discussion about ideas. What it does mean for the Alliance for Change, and this is what I would propose, God willing, I'm elected, is the Alliance for Change, after it's done that re-examination of why it has ended up where it is misstep, we have to build out the Alliance for Change. We have to build muscle. We have to go to the entire country and say to the people, first of all, listen to the people, and then say to them, this is how we think this can be done. And then we can start talking about, the coalition or a coalition, if that's where we want to go. It may well be if our members say, hey, I don't think you guys should go forward in a coalition, then we don't do it. I think I gathered from my colleague that at the moment they don't seem to be that interested. But that is not the reason why the AFC will not go in it. I think the AFC has to examine where it misstepped, examine what was the reason for that, examine why it didn't work, and seriously consider whether we individually can do it. Because we hope to persuade people that our idea about what a new Guyana is, people will see it for what it is and hopefully support us.
I've seen some videos and pictures of you going around the country, especially in the hinterland in recent days. So it's clear that you've been reaching out to party members.
I don't think the people of Linden will be happy with you for calling them hinterland. I mean, I went to Linden as well. Just pulling your leg.
Well, you're right. It was
no. I'm just being specific.
Like highway. You're right. I don't know why I'm reaching hinterland, because you spend so much time there. But yes, this Linden Sioux Like Highway and in Linden and so forth. What have you without giving away secrets, is there anything new that you've learned in the short but hectic campaign?
David, one of the things that people have been saying, or I should say articulating, especially old members who are now coming back or appear to be coming back or have expressed re-interest in the party, and I've seen a lot of that, is that they have strong views on why the way we were treated within the coalition. They have strong views on whether we should have been in the coalition in the first place. They have strong views on the possibility that this Alliance for Change, whether dead or otherwise, can again offer to the people of Guyana. And I will say this in relation to the dead meat comment, because people say the Alliance for Change is a dead party. In any democracy in the Western world, there have been cases where parties have been decimated at the national elections. The British elections are coming up on the 4th of July. The Labour Party was completely decimated at the last election on the Jeremy Corbyn. The Labour Party is on the cusp of decimating the Conservative Party. So a party is never dead. It's never dead in that sense. A party gets trashed because its supporters and the citizenry don't agree with its actions. But it doesn't die. And particularly for the Alliance for Change, when it ran as an independent party, first of all, it got the largest number of third-party seats ever in the history of the Caribbean. And then at the second election, it increased that number. Now, that has never happened anywhere else, and it must come that up to the second election, people's confidence in the Alliance for Change increased. So I hear people saying that dead, nothing is dead permanently. I think why people say that is because in an ethnically divided society, they figure it's got to be one of the others. But that is because real options have not been presented to them, or they might have evaporated.
Nigel Hughes here tonight. It's been a long night because we had Norton before, and now Nigel. Tomorrow the PNC's Congress begins, and then on Saturday the AFC will have its Congress. Nigel, as we close out, any closing thoughts? Anything that you wanted to say that you didn't get to say because I didn't ask a question before you?
No, I'm always humbled and appreciative of you affording me an opportunity like this. I would just like to say to the people of Guyana, I want us to focus on Guyana and how we make this country that has afforded us a life here. Now that we are in our time of plenty, it is more important that we actually plan for the future and that we do this collectively and that we actually engage each other. This toxicity and distance between our leadership and not engaging, I think, must cease. It's a new day, new engagement. I hope that those who have the power to elect me on Saturday are persuaded by my ideas. Like I said before, I don't want you to bring Nigel Hughes, whatever else. It's whether you are persuaded by the ideas that I have. And I thank you again, David. You have been in this struggle longer than most. You have constantly afforded people an opportunity to hear different views, and particularly in matters that were important to people of African descent, you have offered an avenue for discussion. And I think that should be across the board because the future of this country depends on us being able to discuss freely. I just want to remind you of this. There was a time when you couldn't even mention the word race in political discourse in Ghana. People were afraid to discuss it. Now, I think we are maturing to the stage where not only can we discuss it, but we can discuss it maturely. And so I thank you for being one of the leaders in that process. And again, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Nigel, and good luck on Saturday with the conference, the Congress, because the Congress is more important, or primary. The Congress is primary. The election is just part of the Congress, although people, at least this cycle, conflate.
David, forgive me for correcting you. The Congress is at Sophia. The conference is the EFC's one. We have a conference, not a Congress. But I get your message.
And I should know that. I should know that because my own party doesn't have a Congress. And we don't even have delegates. We have what is called members' conference. So the conference is on Saturday. I think the correction is in order because it is a big difference. Good luck.
Indeed.
Good luck
Thank
on
you.
the deliberative conference and good luck on your candidacy.
Thank you so much again for having me.
Nigel Hughes, you know, it's always my pleasure. For me, what is most important is that we afford an opportunity for everyone to express themselves. I said no comments tonight, but I've put up Guy Hen's comment because I think it, in a sense, encapsulates a kind of maturity that is developing among our people that gladdens my heart. And I can read it. Referring to Nigel, he said, this man is a thinker with the political skill of Norton, the brains Nigel and Hines. Guyana can return to its status of leadership. That's the kind of team spirit that I'm talking about and that I want us to cultivate, especially among the opposition. No one party, no one leader as the answer, but together, I am saying we have the skills, the brains, the energy, the appeal in the opposition to bring this thing home whenever a free and fair and credible election is being called. Thank you very much, Guy Hen, for really articulating what so many of us are thinking. Tomorrow night we take a break because it's Congress night, and I know most of you will be glued to your social media platforms to follow the opening of Congress. So I'll see you all on Monday when the results would be in, and we will know who is the leader of the AFC and the leader of the PNC. But for those of you who are cricket followers, we will be on Sunday night. I know it's not happy campaign, but we've got to analyze what went wrong, what went right. So for the cricket enthusiasts, I'll see you all on Sunday night. And for the rest of us, all of us, I'll see you all on Monday night. Here is hoping that all goes well on the weekend and that we come out of it looking better than we are looking going in to those meetings. See you all on Sunday and the rest of us on Monday.